512 BC, or perhaps 513, as modern chronologies continue to debate. Darius I, King of Kings, advances north into Europe at the head of the most sophisticated imperial system of the age. His Achaemenid dominion reaches from Central Asia and the approaches to the Indus, across Iran and Mesopotamia, to Egypt, Anatolia, and the Aegean frontier. Its power rests on more than armies. Provinces deliver tribute. Royal roads carry intelligence and commands. Engineers bridge rivers. Fleets support campaigns across multiple shores. Local rulers remain loyal through a calculated mixture of privilege, fear, and dependence. This machinery had been designed to make resistance politically legible. A rebellious city could be besieged. A hostile king could be defeated or replaced. A palace could be occupied, a treasury seized, and an existing bureaucracy redirected toward a new master. Persia did not merely destroy states. It absorbed them, converting conquest into administration and administration into enduring power. North of the Black Sea, however, that machinery encountered an adversary that seemed to dissolve whenever the imperial hand closed around it. The Scythians offered no obvious capital to capture, no central bureaucracy to appropriate, no concentrated army compelled to defend a fixed frontier, and no guarantee of battle on Persian terms. Their rulers could withdraw across enormous distances while preserving warriors, herds, alliances, and political authority. To an empire built around the possession of territory, abandoned land appeared to signify defeat. To the Scythians, territory could be surrendered temporarily without surrendering the society that gave it meaning. A state without a capturable center could force an empire to fight geography itself. I am Professor Adrian Lockwell, the Time Detective, guiding this inquiry for Archives of Humanity. At the heart of Darius's Northern War lies a mystery about the nature of power itself. What happens when an empire capable of conquering almost anything confronts an enemy that refuses to become a conquerable object? Herodotus, writing generations after the expedition in Book 4 of the Histories, places the Scythian king Idanthyrsus near the center of the resistance. Yet even his dramatic account does not reveal a unified nation acting with a single will. It presents negotiations among neighboring peoples, divided councils, rival interests, and potential allies who disagreed over why Persia had invaded. Some reportedly believe that earlier Scythian actions had provoked the crisis and therefore refused to share its dangers. Darius was not confronting one disciplined state in the Persian image. He was entering a politically fragmented world whose divisions might have appeared exploitable, yet whose very lack of centralization made decisive conquest elusive. The Scythians did not need to overthrow the Achaemenid Empire. They needed only to prevent the King of Kings from translating movement across the map into recognized submission. The traditional interpretation follows the moral architecture of Herodotus. Imperial ambition enters the open steppe, the landscape empties before it, and Persian power discovers the limits of arrogance. In that reading, the expedition was a failed conquest, and Scythian mobility became the instrument of defeat. Yet the Achaemenid scholarship of Pierre Briant and Amélie Court warns against allowing a Greek narrative of royal hubris to define Persian strategy automatically. Christopher Tuplin's work on Achaemenid frontiers and Greek representations of Persia sharpens the central uncertainty. Permanent annexation may have been Darius's objective, but punishment, reconnaissance, frontier security, prestige, or control of the western Black Sea approaches remain plausible. Herodotus is indispensable, but not infallible. He preserves names, arguments, political tensions, and campaign traditions while shaping them through Greek speeches, symbolic geography, and retrospective drama. Was Darius defeated? Was he strategically checked by an enemy he could neither pin down nor compel to submit? Or was this a limited demonstration of imperial reach whose humiliation expanded in later Greek memory? The answer remains hidden inside the identity of the adversary, because even the word Scythian conceals royal dynasties, mobile coalitions, agricultural communities, traders, and mounted peoples whom ancient observers struggled to classify, and whom modern history has too often compressed into a single wandering horde. Beyond Persia's frontier stood no nation in the modern sense, and certainly no single horde wandering without institutions. From roughly the 7th century BC onward, the principal Scythian horizon extended north of the Black Sea and across the Pontic-Caspian steppe. This was not an empty wilderness but a connected world of grasslands, river corridors, farming zones, migration routes, and commercial arteries linking Europe, the Caucasus, Central Eurasia, and the Mediterranean. Even the name resists precision. Greek writers used Scythian. Achaemenid inscriptions applied Saka to several peoples beyond the empire's settled frontiers. Modern archaeologists identify Scythian horizons through recurring weapons, horse equipment, burial practices, and animal-style art. Yet these classifications overlap imperfectly. A Greek historian, a Persian court scribe, and a modern archaeologist could use different labels for related communities, or similar labels for politically distinct ones. Linguistic evidence places most Scythian groups within the wider Iranian-speaking world. Personal and royal names preserved by Greek authors can often be interpreted through Iranian languages. But linguistic kinship did not create political unity. Shared or related speech could coexist with regional dialects, rival dynasties, intermarriage, temporary confederations, and violent competition. Language made alliances easier to construct. It did not determine whom a warrior obeyed. Herodotus preserves this complexity without fully resolving it. In Book 4, he distinguishes royal Scythians, nomadic Scythians, agricultural Scythians, and communities he calls plowmen. The royal Scythians appear as a dominant political stratum claiming authority over others. Pastoral groups moved with their herds, while farming populations cultivated crops, some apparently for Black Sea markets. The result was not a society of mounted wanderers, but a landscape of interdependent economies. Herodotus, however, was translating that landscape into categories intelligible to a Greek audience. His divisions may combine genuine economic differences with geography, political rank, and Greek ethnographic ordering. They reveal diversity, but not a census of fixed tribes. The same caution separates the Scythians from their neighbors and successors. Askold Ivanchik's work on Greek traditions demonstrates why the earlier Cimmerians cannot simply be renamed as primitive Scythians, nor were the later Sarmatians merely Scythians under another title. These populations fought, traded, intermarried, borrowed military practices, absorbed outsiders, and sometimes occupied overlapping territories. Continuity did not mean sameness. Political succession did not require complete population replacement. The Kurgans provide another archive, one built not from royal decrees, but from the organization of death. Research associated with Renato Rall, Barry Cunliffe, and Hermann Parzinger has shown how burial mounds, ranging from modest graves to monumental royal complexes, exposed the structure of Scythian authority. The scale of a mound demonstrated command over labor. Sacrificed horses proclaimed control of herds and the wealth required to remove valuable animals from circulation. Weapons converted martial reputation into hereditary prestige. Imported Greek vessels revealed access to Black Sea commerce, while elaborate gold work transformed distant materials and specialized craftsmanship into visible legitimacy. Some elite burials also contained attendants or retainers killed and interred with the ruler. The violence was political as much as ritual. It declared that hierarchy extended beyond life itself. These objects were not decorative curiosities from an institutionless wilderness. A ruler capable of mobilizing workers, attracting craftsmen, redistributing imported luxuries, commanding warriors, and carrying dependents into death-possessed organized power, even without a stone capital or surviving tax archive. The absence of bureaucracy in recognizable imperial form was not the absence of government. Archaeology, nevertheless, creates its own illusion of certainty. Similar arrowheads, cauldrons, ornaments, and burial rites cannot prove that every community using them called itself Scythian. Objects crossed political boundaries through commerce, imitation, marriage, migration, conquest, and prestige. Material culture is a pattern reconstructed by scholars. Ethnicity was a living claim, negotiated and contested by ancient communities. Turning artifact distributions into rigid national borders would impose a modern map upon a world organized through shifting allegiance. Archaeogenetics has complicated the older migration story still further. Research by Unterlander and colleagues, published in Nature Communications in 2017, identified both regional continuity and substantial east-west mixture among Iron Age steppe populations. Work by Neki Ruscone and colleagues, published in Science Advances in 2021, reinforced a picture of mobility, admixture, and multiple regional formations rather than one biologically uniform people advancing westward from a single homeland. DNA can reveal ancestry, movement, and population contact. It cannot identify a royal Scythian, reconstruct an oath of loyalty, or determine which king received tribute from a particular warrior. Genetics traces relationships between populations. It does not recover political identity by itself. The Scythian world therefore emerges as a field of related but distinct communities, connected and divided by language, ecology, marriage, commerce, coercion, and royal ambition. A victorious coalition could expand the meaning of Scythian authority. A broken alliance could contract it just as quickly. Their apparent vagueness was not evidence of social confusion. It reflected a political order in which power could travel through networks instead of remaining enclosed within fixed borders. That flexibility, however, still required material foundations. Horse herds had to be fed, warriors armed, trade routes protected, and movement sustained across immense distances. The mounted archer was only the visible edge of a much larger economic and military system. Across the Pontic grasslands, military power began long before an arrow left the string. It began with pasture. A mounted warband depended on breeding herds, trained riding horses, spare mounts, seasonal grazing routes, reliable water, and inherited knowledge of where animals could survive winter. A warrior rotating among several horses could maintain a pace that exhausted infantry and overburdened cavalry with fewer remounts. But every additional animal increased the demand for forage. Scythian mobility was not magic. It was ecology converted into strategy. Barry Cunliffe's work on the steppe clarifies the mechanism. Communities had to know when herds should disperse, where they could concentrate, and which corridors could sustain mass movement. Families, herders, craftsmen, wagons, and dependent populations preserved the system behind the fighters. Wintering grounds could not be abandoned indefinitely, while access to migration routes depended on kinship, alliance, intimidation, or negotiated passage. Mobility expanded political choice, but grass and water imposed hard limits. Within those limits, Scythian weapons produced exceptional operational freedom. Eugene Chernenko's studies emphasize the compact composite bow, constructed from wood, horn, and sinew to deliver formidable power from horseback. The Garridos combined bow case and quiver, allowing the weapon and its ammunition to remain accessible in motion. Trilobate bronze arrowheads could be produced in quantity and launched from changing directions. Spears and short swords became useful when distance collapsed, while scale armor protected some elite warriors and, in certain cases, their horses. There were no stirrups. Stability came from saddle equipment, balance, and horsemanship cultivated from childhood. The result was not simply a fast cavalry charge. Mounted archers could reconnoiter, harass a marching column, stage a feigned withdrawal, mass against an isolated detachment, and disperse before the enemy restored formation. Their greatest weapon was control over contact, whether it occurred, where it occurred, and how long it lasted. The famous rider, however, was only the visible edge of a larger productive order. Herodotus divided the region into nomadic, agricultural, and plowland populations. His categories reflect Greek habits of classification, but they preserve an essential truth. Forest steppe producers and farming communities supplied grain and other goods to networks that crossed ecological zones. Pastoralists and cultivators were connected through tribute, exchange, coercion, and protection. The familiar division between nomad and farmer conceals the interdependence that sustained horses, households, and royal power. Those networks extended to Greek colonies such as Olbia and Pontic-Caspian. Grain, livestock, hides, fish products, and enslaved people moved toward Black Sea markets. Wine, ceramics, metalwork, and prestige goods traveled inland. Commerce did not pacify the frontier. It created wealth, strategic gateways, and new prizes over which rulers could compete. The great kurgans at Chertomlik, Saloka, and related sites reveal how that wealth became authority. As Renata Rall's studies of material culture demonstrate, elite gold work and imported Greek vessels were not merely decorations placed beside the dead. They recorded unequal access to exchange. Royal households converted commerce into prestige, then redistributed luxury to reward followers, secure allegiance, and proclaim dynastic legitimacy. A gold vessel could become frozen diplomacy, proof that distant wealth reached the community through the ruler. Command followed the same logic. Scythian kings did not possess a uniform bureaucratic chain comparable to that of a territorial empire. Authority moved through royal prestige, kinship, reputation, gifts, coercion, and negotiated allegiance. Allied chiefs retained followers and interests of their own. Such coalitions could gather quickly, yet fracture when rewards disappeared, rival dynasts defected, or a campaign endangered one group more than another. Information traveled through this human web. Scouts interpreted tracks, heard movements, and grazing conditions. Merchants carried news between colonies and camps. Interpreters crossed linguistic boundaries, while dependent communities, defectors, and allied tribes reported movements that distant imperial officials struggled to verify. The steppe only appeared empty to outsiders. In reality, it was dense with intelligence controlled through relationships rather than fixed administrative posts. The mounted archer's effectiveness therefore rested on herds, producers, craftsmen, traders, clients, and informants. Once Scythian rulers learned to convert that entire system into political leverage, their influence could reach beyond the grasslands and into the embattled courts of the ancient Near East. Beyond the Caucasus, Scythian mobility became an instrument of diplomacy in a region crowded with frightened kingdoms and unstable alliances. During the 7th century BC, Assyria remained the Near East's dominant military power, yet its northern frontier was becoming dangerously fluid. Sumerian war bands struck into Anatolia. Urartu maneuvered through the Armenian highlands. Median power gathered east of Mesopotamia. Between them moved mounted coalitions whose loyalties could change faster than Assyrian armies could redeploy. Assyrian officials did not describe these forces as one anonymous barbarian tide. Royal correspondence and oracle inquiries recorded rulers, envoys, factions, and suspected alliances. The court wanted names because names made negotiation possible. But knowing a leader's name did not reveal how far his authority extended. One of those leaders was Ishpaka, identified in Assyrian material as a Scythian king. He appears among Assyria's enemies during the violent struggle for control of the northern approaches and was eventually killed in conflict with Assyrian forces. His death, however, did not eliminate Scythian influence. It merely changed which dynasty could bargain with the empire. Perpetua emerged under radically different circumstances. Often associated with the Protothes preserved in later Greek tradition, he entered the calculations of King Esarhaddon not simply as a military threat, but as a potential relative. An Assyrian oracle inquiry asks whether Perpetua would honor an agreement if Esarhaddon gave him a royal daughter in marriage. The question exposes the sophistication of Assyrian frontier policy. The court was not merely attempting to purchase a warrior's temporary obedience. It was testing whether kinship could convert unpredictable military power into lasting political interest. Dynastic marriage was frontier technology. A Scythian ruler joined to Esarhaddon's family might become invested in Assyria's survival, prestige, and succession. His cavalry could be redirected against rival coalitions. His enemies could be isolated, while gifts, titles, tribute, hostages, and privileged access to imperial markets reinforced the arrangement. Where fortresses could not seal every mountain passage, marriage attempted to build a human bridge across the frontier. Yet the oracle inquiry also reveals anxiety. Would Perpetua keep his word? Did he command every group Assyrian scribes categorized as Scythian? Could an agreement with one dynasty restrain distant chiefs, ambitious relatives, and independent war leaders? Settled empires often possessed names without possessing certainty. They might recognize a king while remaining unable to determine whether his kingship represented centralized command, temporary coalition leadership, or personal prestige among groups free to disregard him. The empire could negotiate with the man, but it could not always measure the coalition behind him. That information gap shaped policy. Assyrian courts cultivated interpreters, merchants, defectors, border governors, and allied rulers. Gifts strengthened one faction, while intelligence networks monitored another. Recognition could elevate a selected chief, making imperial favor a weapon inside mobile politics. Divide and rule was therefore more than aggression. It was an admission that Assyria rarely knew where one northern political network ended and another began. Herodotus, in Book 1 of the Histories, carries this unstable world forward through Medes, described as the son of Protothes. He credits Medes and the Scythians with intervening against the Medes and maintaining ascendancy in Asia for 28 years, until Median leaders supposedly recovered power through deception and slaughter. That account cannot be treated as a precise record of one unified Scythian occupation. Assyrian documentation confirms major northern intervention, named rulers, shifting alliances, and formidable military influence. It does not clearly demonstrate that a single Scythian state governed the Near East continuously for 28 years. Scholars including Askold Ivanchik have shown that Greek narrative, Assyrian records, and later traditions preserve overlapping but imperfect memories. Herodotus's word for domination may compress raids, tribute extraction, mercenary service, alliances, and temporary regional supremacy into one dramatic formula. This ambiguity was itself a strategic advantage. A steppe ruler could raid one kingdom, serve another, bargain as an autonomous king, and later return as an indispensable ally whose price had risen because former enemies now needed his cavalry. The Scythians were not politically innocent horsemen circling civilization. They had entered its marriage negotiations, intelligence contests, succession struggles, and security councils. The Achaemenid Empire would inherit this northern problem on a far greater scale. Its answer would be not one marriage or one subsidized faction, but an extraordinary projection of imperial force toward the Black Sea and the Danube. Darius I approached Europe as a ruler forged by civil conflict. In 522 BC, he had taken the throne amid a disputed succession and rebellions across the empire. The Behistun inscription transformed that violent struggle into a doctrine of government. Darius described his enemies not simply as rivals, but as rebels and liars attacking the order upheld by Ahura Mazda. In this royal vocabulary, conquest was restoration. Submission was proof that truth had returned. That doctrine commanded formidable machinery. Provincial administrations collected tribute and mobilized resources. Royal roads carried officials, intelligence, and orders across enormous distances. Naval contingents, engineers, interpreters, local dynasties, and soldiers from numerous subject peoples allowed the Achaemenid state to project force without imposing a single administrative model everywhere. Regional elites were often preserved because cooperation was cheaper than replacement. Persia made their authority dependent upon the great king, then converted that dependence into imperial reach. Herodotus, in Book 4 of the Histories, describes this apparatus crossing from Asia into Europe over a bridge of boats spanning the Bosporus. The structure was traditionally credited to mandrakles of Samos, who later commemorated the achievement in a painting. Infrastructure had become political theater. Darius was not merely moving an army across water. He was displaying an empire capable of turning the sea into a road. Beyond the Bosporus stood Thrace, the western Black Sea corridor, and the Danube, the final great river before the northern steppe. Persian control along this axis could secure the European approaches to Anatolia, discipline resistant communities, expand influence over Black Sea routes, and prepare the ground for later operations. Permanent occupation of the entire steppe may never have been the only objective. Punishment for earlier Scythian incursions, reconnaissance, frontier security, prestige, commercial leverage, and a visible acknowledgement of Persian sovereignty all remain plausible. The Greek-centered tradition sharpened the expedition into a warning against imperial arrogance. Herodotus portrayed vengeance in a king's refusal to tolerate independence beyond his command. Yet the scholarship of Pierre Briant and Amélie Court cautions against reducing Achaemenid policy to theatrical hubris. Christopher Tuplin likewise emphasizes how Greek narratives could recast complicated frontier strategy as a moral contest between freedom and despotism. Darius may have sought something less than annihilation but more than a raid, a controlled demonstration that compelled submission without requiring permanent occupation. Herodotus assigns him an immense army, but such totals belong to a literary tradition in which numbers magnified royal power. They cannot be accepted as precise head counts. Even a substantially smaller force would have strained a region. Persia could coordinate ships, bridge crews, cavalry, infantry, supplies, and multinational contingents with extraordinary sophistication. But every soldier and animal multiplied the demand for grain, water, fodder, and reliable communication. Imperial manpower was both an advantage and an appetite. At the Danube, another bridge of boats carried the expedition across. Darius entrusted its protection to Ionian Greek tyrants whose cities depended upon Persian sponsorship. This was coalition management disguised as engineering. Men such as Histiaeus of Miletus ruled because the empire sustained them against domestic opponents. Their loyalty rested not only upon obedience, but upon political survival. The bridge was therefore an escape route, a chain of command, and a hostage mechanism. If Darius disappeared beyond the river, the regimes guarding his return might collapse with him. This European expedition must not be confused with the Eastern campaign against the Pontic-Caspian Saka recorded Epihiston. There, Darius claimed to have crossed a river, defeated the Saka, captured their leader Skunka, and installed another ruler. That operation probably occurred in Central Asia rather than north of the Black Sea. Its success may nevertheless have reinforced a dangerous assumption that another mobile frontier could be disciplined through engineering, speed, and the capture of recognized leadership. The European theater obeyed different equations. Supply magazines receded behind the army. Messages traveled more slowly. Subject contingents retained interests of their own. Horses consumed the pasture required for continued pursuit. The rivers that advertised Persian mastery also became narrow points upon which the expedition depended. Darius had built a rational campaign around the expectation that sustained pressure would eventually produce negotiation, submission, or battle. The imperial machinery crossed the Danube intact. Ahead, the Scythians began stripping those assumptions away while refusing the confrontation the great king needed. Beyond the Danube, Persian superiority became difficult to convert into victory. The Scythians first appealed to neighboring peoples for a common defense, but Herodotus reports that several refused. Their calculation was brutally political. Earlier Scythian incursions into Asia, they argued, had helped provoke Persian hostility. Those who had created the danger could face it alone. Some groups offered support, but there was no united national resistance. Memory, rivalry, and self-preservation divided the steppe before Persian arms could do so. Idanthyrsus fought with an imperfect coalition. Scythian forces separated, withdrew along different routes, and sometimes drew the Persian advance toward the territories of peoples who had rejected the alliance. This was more than retreat. It was coercive diplomacy conducted through geography. If reluctant neighbors would not join the war voluntarily, the movement of the war might force them to reconsider. The campaign became a struggle over tempo. The Scythians denied Darius the concentrated battle his imperial system was designed to win. They threatened exposed detachments, withdrew before superior formations, and dispersed whenever the Persians attempted to force decisive contact. Herodotus claims that they destroyed forage, filled wells, and stripped the route of useful resources. Such measures are plausible, but the evidence depends heavily upon his account and cannot be treated as a complete operational record. The underlying logic is clearer. Every advance lengthened Persian communications. Every delay consumed provisions. Every pursuit exhausted horses and transport animals that could not be replaced as easily as infantry levies. The Scythians were not infinitely mobile. Their families, herds, pastures, and water sources imposed real constraints. But they understood those constraints better than the invaders. Darius controlled the march. Idanthyrsus increasingly controlled whether the march produced anything. The Persian king now faced a royal contradiction. Continued pursuit deepened the logistical danger. Withdrawal without visible submission threatened imperial prestige. Achaemenid authority rested not only upon force, but upon the public demonstration that resistance ended in restored order. Yet the Greek framing must be treated cautiously. Herodotus shaped the expedition into a drama of imperial ambition confounded by freedom, while the campaign's objectives, route, and geographic extent remain disputed. Herodotus gives Idanthyrsus the campaign's sharpest political answer. The Scythians possessed no cities or cultivated heartland that compelled them to fight in the Persian manner. But if Darius attacked their ancestral tombs, battle would follow. Open space could be surrendered temporarily. Sacred legitimacy could not. The tombs marked the boundary between expendable territory and non-negotiable identity. Mobility did not mean attachment to nothing. Then the Scythians sent Darius a bird, a mouse, a frog, and arrows. Darius interpreted the objects as submission. Earth, water, mobility, and military power symbolically surrendered to Persia. Gobrias offered the darker reading. Unless the Persians could fly like birds, burrow like mice, or hide in water like frogs, Scythian arrows would destroy them. The same gift sustained opposite meanings because each side defined victory in incompatible terms. The decisive crisis had meanwhile shifted behind the army. Scythian envoys urged the Ionian Greek tyrants guarding the Danube bridge to destroy the crossing. If it vanished, Darius might be trapped beyond the river. Imperial survival suddenly depended less upon Persian cavalry than upon the loyalty of politically vulnerable clients. Histiaeus of Miletus understood what was at stake. The Ionian tyrants remained in power because Persia sustained them. If Darius perished, their own populations might overthrow them. They therefore preserved the king who preserved their regimes, reportedly giving the appearance of dismantling the bridge while keeping the crossing recoverable. The Danube bridge, not the open battlefield, had become the campaign's center of gravity. Darius withdrew, but there is no secure evidence of annihilation or a panicked rout. The Persian army escaped, and Persian influence in Thrace remained strategically significant. Yet the Pontic-Scythians were neither absorbed nor compelled into unmistakable submission. Operational frustration and strategic limitation are clearer than a conventional battlefield defeat. Herodotus fashioned a morality tale from the expedition. Modern scholarship leaves open the possibility that Persian objectives were more limited. In either case, Idanthyrsus denied Darius the decisive political conclusion that conquest was expected to produce. Survival against Persia became the Scythians' most famous achievement. It was not permanence. Later rulers would concentrate wealth, territory, and royal authority, and in doing so, give their enemies something far easier to strike. By the 4th century BC, Scythian power near the lower Danube was becoming more concentrated. At its center stood Darius, one of the most formidable rulers of the Western Steppe. His long political career was not built on seasonal raiding alone. He maneuvered among Greek cities, Thracian dynasts, grain-producing districts, river crossings, and the commercial arteries connecting the Black Sea with the Balkans. This was a Scythian political formation increasingly entangled with settled wealth. Greek ports offered access to markets, manufactured goods, diplomatic intermediaries, and maritime trade. Agricultural communities supplied grain. Tribute relationships converted military dominance into recurring revenue. Control of strategic approaches allowed Darius to influence movement between the steppe, the Danube, and the Greek coastal world. The extent of his authority remains disputed. Darius may have presided over substantial royal consolidation, but that does not mean he ruled a modern territorial state with uniform borders, permanent ministries, and equal control across every district. His power was probably uneven, strongest near the lower Danube, and sustained through personal allegiance, coercion, tribute, commerce, and military reputation. He possessed royal reach without possessing bureaucratic uniformity. Coinage associated with Darius captures this ambiguity. Issues bearing his name, linked with Greek civic and minting contexts, particularly collatus, reveal a ruler communicating through the economic language of the Black Sea. A royal name on coinage could announce status, facilitate exchange, and project legitimacy among merchants and cities. It demonstrated political messaging and economic integration. It did not prove that Darius administered every market in which those coins appeared. That integration increased his power, but it also changed what power required him to defend. Settled populations, commercial partners, tribute networks, livestock, river approaches, and recognized zones of influence could not all be abandoned without political cost. Darius could negotiate as a king among kings. He could also be identified, isolated, and confronted as one. The confrontation came in 339 BC, when Darius collided with Philip II of Macedon. Philip had transformed Macedonia through military reform, diplomacy, siegecraft, and ruthless opportunism. His northern policy sought secure approaches, accessible wealth, control of communications, and the removal of regional powers capable of threatening Macedonian operations. Aetius was precisely the kind of independent ruler Philip preferred either to subordinate or to break. The fullest surviving account appears in Justin's Epitome of Pompeius Trogus, composed centuries after the events and filtered through Roman-era compression and moral rhetoric. According to that tradition, Aetius requested Philip's assistance during a conflict involving the people of Histria, offering adoption and succession as diplomatic bait. Once the danger disappeared, Aetius rejected Macedonian help and denied the arrangement. Philip later demanded money while operating near Byzantium. Aetius refused, reportedly answering with calculated contempt. The sequence may have been sharpened into a drama of arrogance and punishment. Yet the diplomatic rupture fits the political logic of the age. Philip required acknowledgement of Macedonian primacy. Aetius depended upon visible independence before allies, clients, and rivals. Where authority rested heavily on personal prestige, insult was not empty theater. A humiliated ruler could lose obedience long before losing a battle. Battle followed. Aetius, reportedly nearly 90 years old, was killed, and his forces were defeated. Justin claims that the Macedonians captured enormous numbers of animals, women, and children. The totals cannot be accepted uncritically. Ancient victory narratives regularly magnified plunder, but the categories themselves are revealing. Philip had seized more than trophies. He had struck at mobile wealth, dependent labor, household continuity, and the material foundations from which mounted power was regenerated. Even the victory exposed the instability of Balkan conquest. During the return journey, the Triballi attacked the Macedonians, wounded Philip, and recovered much of the plunder. Triumph could be announced in one territory and dismantled in the next. The inversion from Darius was profound. The Persian king had struggled against opponents who refused to make territory decisive. Philip faced a later Scythian kingdom tied more closely to concentrated wealth, diplomatic obligations, and a royal center embodied in Aetius. Consolidation produced revenue and bargaining power. It also created assets that could be captured and a ruler whose death could destabilize an entire coalition. Aetius's fall did not extinguish the Scythians. Macedon had shattered one formidable concentration of authority, not erased a people. Scythian communities and regional dynasties endured, while new coalitions, above all the Sarmatians, began transforming the balance of the steppe from within. Aetius's defeat broke a formidable royal project, but it did not empty the steppe. From the later 4th century before Christ, and more visibly through the 3rd, Sarmatian groups expanded westward from regions beyond the Don into the Pontic-Caspian world. Greek and Roman writers increasingly filled their maps with names such as Sarmatians, Roxolani, and Iazyges. Older histories turned this change into a clean conquest. The Sarmatians arrived, and the Scythians disappeared. The evidence refuses such simplicity. Modern studies of Sarmatian expansion, reinforced by the archaeological syntheses of Hermann Parzinger and Barry Cunliffe, reveal an uneven frontier rather than a single westward tidal wave. Some communities were destroyed or displaced. Others submitted to incoming elites, migrated toward Crimea and the lower Dnieper, or entered new coalitions. Warfare operated beside intermarriage, elite replacement beside cultural continuity. Burial customs changed, but not everywhere at once. Weapons, horse equipment, ornaments, and ritual practices crossed political boundaries. Populations identified by outsiders as Scythian were absorbed, reorganized, renamed, or compressed into territories where they constructed a different kind of power. That transformation became visible in Crimea. By the 2nd century before Christ, a later Scythian kingdom had developed across the Crimean interior and the lower Dnieper region. Its most revealing center was Scythian Neapolis, near modern Simferopol. Excavations have uncovered defensive walls, houses, storage facilities, imported goods, monumental buildings, and an elite mausoleum traditionally connected with the dynasty of King Silurus. This was no longer the political system that had denied Darius a fixed target. It possessed a center capable of collecting produce, storing wealth, displaying royal authority, and coordinating defense. Silurus appears to have ruled a substantial regional kingdom during the 2nd century before Christ, although the limits of his authority remain disputed. His power rested increasingly upon cultivated land, fortified settlements, taxation, commerce, and pressure against neighboring Greek cities. The distinction between nomad and farmer had never been absolute, but it now carried greater strategic consequences. Sedentarization was not cultural surrender. It allowed rulers to extract grain, control roads, support garrisons, and intervene more directly in Black Sea trade. Yet every wall created an obligation to defend it. Every field bound political survival to territory, labor, and harvest. Administrative power increased, while the strategic depth once available to mobile coalitions contracted. The struggle with Chersonesus exposed the price of that adaptation. Facing growing Scythian pressure, the Greek city on Crimea's southwestern coast appealed to Mithridates VI of Pontus. Near the end of the 2nd century before Christ, his general Diophantus campaigned in Crimea against forces associated with Silurus's successor, Halichus. Inscriptions from Chersonesus, supported cautiously by later literary traditions, placed these wars inside the machinery of Hellenistic statecraft. Fortified cities, royal alliances, diplomatic appeals, sieges, and expeditionary armies. The later Scythians had become deeply entangled in this political system, as kings, rivals, tax collectors, trading partners, and military targets. Ancient vocabulary concealed as much as it revealed. Strabo and later Greco-Roman geographers continued to use the name Scythian broadly, sometimes applying it to peoples far removed from the formations that had confronted Persia. Inherited geography changed more slowly than political reality. A familiar name could remain on a map after alliances, languages, populations, and ruling houses had been rearranged. Archaeology and recent archaeogenetic research deepened this picture without reducing it to a single migration story. Steppe populations show both substantial continuity and repeated east-west admixture. Genetic evidence can identify patterns of ancestry and movement, but it cannot recover a Greek ethnonym from a skeleton, reconstruct allegiance to Silurus, or grant exclusive ownership of an ancient people to any modern nation. Political identity emerged from language, kinship, patronage, residence, coercion, and circumstance, not ancestry alone. That distinction became increasingly important during the long afterlife of Scythian imagery. Persian traditions remembered mounted enemies from the north. Greek authors transformed Scythians into symbols of both savagery and austere freedom. Much later, Russian and Ukrainian intellectual traditions invoked Scythian antiquity in competing visions of geography, ancestry, and national destiny, while other nationalist narratives claimed the prestige of the warrior steppe. Such appropriations reveal the political needs of later societies far more clearly than they establish direct lines of descent. The historical label contracted, but the populations beneath it were being recombined rather than erased. By the time Scythian power survived behind Crimean walls, its institutions had gained permanence and inherited the vulnerabilities that permanence creates. The verdict is neither a romance of nomadic freedom nor an obituary for Persian ambition. Scythian mobility was not the absence of organization. It was organization designed to preserve choice. Herds distributed across grazing zones, scouts and merchants carrying intelligence, mounted forces able to disperse and reunite, and political authority flexible enough to survive the temporary abandonment of territory. What appeared chaotic from an imperial road was coherent across the steppe. Mobility was not simply movement. It was a political system that denied the enemy control over when, where, and why a decision would occur. Territorial empires possessed their greatest leverage when opponents depended upon capitals, storehouses, temples, bureaucracies, and cultivated fields that could be seized. Against such targets, conquest became visible. A gate could be broken, a ruler replaced, tribute counted, and submission recorded. But the Scythians denied Darius I that theater of victory. The Persian army could cross rivers, occupy ground, and continue marching, yet none of those achievements compelled Idanthyrsus to recognize Persian sovereignty. Territory had been entered. The enemy had not been politically captured. Herodotus transformed this collision into a moral drama of imperial arrogance confounded by mobile freedom. Achaemenid scholarship has rightly complicated that picture. Darius may have sought frontier security, punishment, reconnaissance, prestige, or strategic influence rather than the permanent annexation of the entire Pontic steppe. Persia withdrew with its army intact and strengthened its position in parts of Thrace. Yet caution cannot erase the central result. The Pontic-Scythians remained autonomous, and the imperial system failed to produce the decisive submission upon which universal kingship depended. Darius was not annihilated. The Scythians were not conquered. Between those facts lies the campaign's true strategic tension. The invasion also exposed the political anatomy of logistics. The Danube bridge survived because subject rulers chose to preserve it. Histiaeus and the Ionian tyrants understood that their authority rested upon Persian sponsorship. Forage depended upon landscapes and communities. Intelligence traveled through merchants, interpreters, allies, scouts, and defectors. Supply routes depended upon political credibility as much as engineering. In such wars, courage is only one resource among many, and often not the decisive one. An army may dominate every encounter within reach while losing control over the campaign's pace, cost, and meaning. Scythian decentralization created resilience, but it carried a price. Coalitions fractured. Neighboring peoples refused assistance. Royal authority depended upon reputation, kinship, coercion, patronage, and exchange rather than a uniform administrative chain. The same flexibility that frustrated imperial conquest complicated sustained grand strategy. Later rulers accumulated wealth, defended settled interests, and built more concentrated kingdoms, but concentration created targets. The Scythians were never invincible. Their history contained diplomatic brilliance and predation, hierarchy and exploitation, victory and defeat, adaptation and political transformation. Their deepest achievement was therefore more subtle than battlefield triumph. Idanthyrsus refused Darius's definition of victory. He rejected the imperial assumption that withdrawal meant fear, that noncompliance revealed weakness, and that every legitimate society must possess something an invader could seize to force obedience. The ancestral tombs marked the boundary between expendable space and sacred legitimacy. The Scythians could abandon what did not need to be defended because they understood what ultimately did. That distinction remains a mirror for power. Great institutions habitually confuse visibility with control. They count roads taken, districts occupied, rulers removed, markets opened, and declarations signed. Yet political existence does not always reside inside the assets an outsider is prepared to capture. When power misidentifies another society's center of gravity, superiority becomes a trap. Every new commitment deepens the need for a conclusion that force alone cannot deliver. The enduring question is not whether mobility always defeats empire. It does not. The question is whether power can recognize, before exhaustion and pride make withdrawal intolerable, that its opponent is fighting for a different definition of survival. Empires fear adversaries who can deny them a conclusion. The steppe made kings afraid because it exposed the truth every empire resists. Power cannot compel an ending while the opposing society retains the freedom to redefine what must be defended. Was Darius the first strategically defeated, or merely checked? Share the verdict in the comments. Then continue with the documentary on the end screen. Subscribe to Archives of Humanity for more evidence-driven examinations of how civilizations build power, misread their enemies, and confront the limits of strategy.